Hello, everyone. Hola todos y todas. My name is Jesse Worker. I'm from the World Resource Institute, and want to thank the organizers of this meeting and the government of Paraguay for inviting me to give this presentation. I am sorry that I am giving it in English and not Spanish. Hopefully, the presentation slides will help everyone follow along, and I will do my best to speak clearly. So I am going to talk today about work that we have done to assess the state of national laws and practices that provide the public with rights of access to information, public participation, and access to justice for the environment. And my organization, World Resource Institute, has been very active in the Open Government Partnership. We are co-leading the Natural Resource Working Group along with the Natural Resource Governance Institute. And we think there are lots of opportunities for OGP members to make additional commitments related to the natural resources and the environment. And so today I'm going to talk to you about commitments that we see could be made in Paraguay for improved environmental transparency, public participation, and access to justice. So just first, a little bit about our work and history. The World Resource Institute is an organization of 500 staff members, and we have offices in the United States, Brazil, India, China, and Indonesia, and Mexico. And we have staff around the world. My team is called the Access Initiative, or La Iniciativa de Acceso, and we are actually a secretariat for a network of civil society organizations around the world, más que 250 civil society organizations in 60 countries. We worked very closely with these partners who are environmental law experts to produce the tool, El Índice de Democracia Ambiental, that I'm going to talk about, the Environmental Democracy Index. And our goal is to strengthen public rights to participate in decision-making for the environment. So when I say environmental democracy, I'm referring to environmental information being made available, accessible, and to make sure that the information is relevant to the public, so that it is publicly available in formats that are accessible, and that the public can use it, that it's provided timely, low or no cost. That there are opportunities for the public to participate in a meaningful way to be able to influence decisions that affect the environment. And finally, that there are mechanisms for justice or accountability, for redress and grievance for any of these decisions. So in 2015, we launched the Environmental Democracy Index. And this is the first index to measure the strength of laws and regulations at the national level that provide these rights of environmental democracy. We used indicators that we developed that correspond to internationally recognized guidelines by PNUMA or UNEP, the Bali guidelines, and we developed legal indicators. They created an index for access to information, public participation, and access to justice. We also have a subset of indicators on practice, 24 indicators that provide insights into the practice of the law. And I think what is important is that our indicators are objective, so they're based on clear evidence in the law, and they are also actionable. You can see exactly what needs to be done in order to improve the scores, and we think that is very useful for governments and civil society. So this is a map of the countries that were included in the Environmental Democracy Index that launched in 2015. We intend to launch the Environmental Democracy Index every 2 years, and we hope to include more countries in the next round. But you see here that much of South and Central and North America were included in the index. So we have a great ability for you to compare your scores to those of your neighbors. For all countries, we worked with 2 legal experts from your country whom did the research and did the first stage of review. Then at WRI, we reviewed all of the scores and had a process to ensure that the scores were accurate. All governments received their scores and analysis before the launch of the index and were invited to provide comment and feedback. If you would like to still provide comment and feedback, that opportunity is still available, and we will publish your feedback on our website with your permission. Here is a screenshot of the country page for Paraguay on the EDI website. And this is where you can find all of the information that I'm going to be referring to in this presentation can be found on this URL here at the bottom of the screen. So you'll see that we have the scores for the country, but also for each pillar that we measure: access to information, public participation, and access to justice. So first for, sorry, I went the wrong way. And just want to say that we worked closely with our Paraguayan partners, Instituto de Derecho y Economía Ambiental, Fundación Libre, and the Center for Defense of Public Interest. So what do the results from EDI say about environmental democracy in Paraguay? First, I want to say that these results the research took place just before the Access to Information law was passed. So just the months prior to the passage of that law. And so we did not include it because it was not yet in force. However, we found that environmental information was not required to be made proactively available. So that is to say, available without having to make a request. And so we looked at all forms of environmental information, but it could mean air quality, for instance, ambient air quality, or the quality of drinking water, as well as information about pollution from a facility, or information about permit violations. And so that was one way that Paraguay did not score highly because there were not strong legal requirements for environmental information to be made proactively available. We also found that public authorities were not required to update and collect environmental information and make this information available to the public. So we found that the regulations could be strengthened in this regard to ensure that the public has access to updated environmental information and can be actively engaged in being sure that the laws are being followed and that they are active participants in governance of the environment. And also that during environmental emergencies, there was no requirement for information to be made publicly available in a timely fashion. So for instance, if there is a chemical leak or a spill or any other kind of emergency where the public needs information quickly, these types of laws can ensure that all authorities are acting accordingly. In the area of public participation, well, first to start with something good, we found that public participation is required in environmental impact assessments, and that's of course a very good thing. However, we did find that this participation is only required towards the end of the impact assessment, after it has been drafted. We would recommend ensuring that the public has the right to participate early in the process of environmental decision making. That is to say, when they're still in the scoping process, determining perhaps where a project will be, and allowing early public input. So the law does require that public comments be be considered or taken into account. And that is good, but it's not clear what the procedures for doing this are. In other words, it's unclear if agencies must give a response to public comments, must make public what their responses are, why they accepted or rejected public comments. This can be really an important step to build public trust in the decision-making process, and also to give a clear accountability loop for how public participation was considered. We did not find any requirement that any kind of decisions that impact the environment be made public. At the time of research, at least, we found no legal requirement. And again, we can provide you with all of the background and the analysis that we took. But that was one thing that did lower the score for public participation. We also found no requirement for public involvement in the development of rules, policies, programs, or plans that affect the environment. So essentially, the takeaway is that we think laws requiring public participation can be strengthened in many cases in respect to environmental decision making, and we are happy to have conversations about how that can be done. And finally, for access to justice. So access to justice was the highest scoring area for Paraguay. So that's good. It can still be improved, though. The good thing is that the public has a strong right to bring environmental claims to courts. They can challenge both public authorities and the private sector, and that's very good. Very high scores there. However, where we saw areas for improvement is that decisions made by courts are not required to be made public. This is important so that the public has a record of how these court cases were decided. They can see the evidence of what the judiciary decisions were, and they can be better informed on the processes of the court system as in regards to the environment. Also, we found that there were very few mechanisms. There were some, but the mechanisms for reducing barriers to accessing justice. That could mean financial or cost barriers, but it could also mean perhaps gender-based barriers or barriers that marginalized groups face when trying to use a court system. That there were very minimal barriers in this, or minimal mechanisms to reduce barriers to accessing justice. So that is an area for improvement. So how do these results, how can these support the Plan d'Action for the Open Government Partnership? So first of all, the Access to Information Law is a great first step. And we want to make sure that the implementation, we would recommend the implementation be sure to include requirements for proactive disclosure of environmental information, such as ambient air quality, drinking water quality, permit violations for facilities in regards to pollution, emissions, or effluent permits. All of these are really important steps to increase the transparency of environmental quality and the processes that impact it for the public. For public participation, or rather for transparency of decision making, to require that environmental impact assessments and other decisions be made publicly available online for everyone. So make them easily accessible and available online. In our research, we found that they were only available at the agency. Strengthen the legal rights to participate in environmental impact assessments, as I said, at earlier stages. To develop legal mechanisms to reduce those barriers to justice, which I mentioned. And ensure that these decisions are made publicly available, to ensure that the public can access them. These are some of the major takeaways and suggestions we would have. There are other areas where we can look at that we could identify areas for improvement as well. But just to keep focus on some of the major gaps that we found. These were some of the major gaps. So how do these connect to some of the open government partnership and the development plan processes? First, under the IRM, the most recent IRM, recommendation number 4, conformar una mesa de trabajo sobre gobierno abierto y desarrollo ambiental, protección de los recursos naturales y cuidado de los territorios de los pueblos indígenas. Esta debería garantizar la participación de las distintas partes interesadas en el desarrollo del plan y velar por que el siguiente plan de acción incluya compromisos ambiciosos sobre estos temas. So this is what we see as potentially being able to support this recommendation. Also, in connection with the National Development Plan for 2030, we see these recommendations falling under the priorities of reduction of poverty and social development, justice and human rights, also local participation in development, and the inclusive economic growth for open and transparent government. And then finally, these recommendations also fit under the Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, especially under Objetivo 16, so Tarjeta 16.3, 16.7, and 16.10. So around access to information, participation, and access to justice. We think that these can be these improvements can support, especially in regards to the environment. So muchas gracias. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you today. I hope that you found this presentation interesting. And as I communicated to Fabricio and Santiago, first of all, thank you. But also, if you have any questions or feedback, we would be more than happy to carry on this conversation. We hope that we can support you in the excellent work that you're doing to have an open negotiation and discussion of your next OGP action plan. You can contact us here at these email addresses. You can find more information about what I just spoke about WRI generally, and then about the Environmental Democracy Index at these URLs. Thank you very much for your time and attention.